It's one of the most notable developments in South Carolina, but not for what they're building, for what they're leaving untouched. And hospitality has always been a central focus.
Palmetto Bluff is 20,000 acres, which is 1.5 times the size of Manhattan. The Wilson family purchased Palmetto Bluff in the early 1900s. Mr. Wilson was a wealthy New York banker. In the early 1900s, paparazzi followed the wealthy because they weren't necessarily celebrities. And so for him and his family, they wanted an escape. Well, the Wilson's home was a true Southern mansion. His wife was a huge socialite and entertainer in New York City, so to be able to convince her to come to Palmetto Bluff, she needed the same here. Our archaeologist has actually found newspaper clippings from the New York Times that speak of people boarding steamship in New York City to travel to Palmetto Bluff, South Carolina to visit the Wilsons. Elaborate lunches, elaborate dinners. And this was their place, and a lot of those menu items came from the river here and the woods here. So she was really conscious, almost, even back then, about where the food came from and what she was sharing with her guests. Unfortunately, in 1926, the mansion burned down. It burned for 3 days. When the mansion burned, the story goes that Mr. Wilson kept going in. His secretary had to keep pulling him out. He was trying to save all these first editions of his library. Mrs. Wilson only went in once to throw her shoes out the window. The property eventually ended up in the hands of Union Camp in the 1950s, and they made the decision, once they got here, we're not going to timber it. We're not going to ruin this. So we really have a paper company to thank for saving Palmetto Bluff and conserving the resources and giving us what we see here today. So they built a lodge, and every week they would have new guests come in to enjoy time at the lodge. So these were their top clients and customers, dignitaries, and again, it was about fishing and hunting, but then at the end of the day, everybody coming together and sitting at a table and sharing a meal. We know that Union Camp and the Wilsons have been hosting and entertaining and feeding people here for a century, but how do we continue to carry that forward? And that's what we're trying to do here today. And there's a reason that this is a public park today and not private real estate, because part of what we're also trying to do to promote that community connection is to take the best spots here and make them parks where anybody can enjoy these views. When development is complete here, we will have no more than 4,000 homes. But even more important than the built environment, what we're not building and what we're protecting is core to our values here. The Palmetto Bluff Conservancy exists to manage the land and the wildlife, and part of our work together with them is to conserve as much of the land as possible. So our goal when we are done is that 10,000 acres or half of this will be protected and will never be developed.